OnEducation is sponsored by Participate, a community learning platform where the world learns together. Later in the episode, we'll hear about one of Participate's partners, The Sandbox, and how you can get involved in its free community learning opportunities and live streams.
Was I a guest on your podcast, Brad, because you kind of asked nicely?
Yeah, it was a lot of effort. I really chased you down for like a really long time. I sent you a DM, and you said yes. That was pretty much it.
Oh, if I had only known it was that easy, damn.
You wouldn't have had to hire him to be your co-host.
Yeah. Right.
Welcome to the podcast, everyone. Our guest this week, I personally feel needs no real introduction. He is a spoken word poet, educator, TED speaker, author of one of only probably 3 books in my entire life that has ever made me cry, inventor, and just a generally awesome guy. He is the one and only What Teachers Make, Taylor Molly. How's it going?
Oh, it's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I tend to, if I make a mistake, I just double down on that mistake. I go with it. So thank you. So thank you for having me, Mike.
That's pretty much how I live my life, is by doubling down on my mistakes.
So this is exciting. Brad and I have talked about it a couple times, and we talked about it off air, but it's worth telling the story a little bit anyways, that when you were on Brad's previous podcast, and I saw that you were on Brad's previous podcast because, you pay attention to kind of who folks have on their podcasts and stuff. And I was like, God damn it. That's a get. Because I was so jealous. I'm a huge fan, first off. And I'm so happy to have, Brad here so that Brad could then connect. This is all. It's all coming together. The master plan is working.
The only real reason I'm here.
and was I a guest on your podcast, Brad, because you kind of asked nicely?
Yeah, it was a lot of effort. I really chased you down for like a really long time. I sent you a DM, and you said yes. That was pretty much it.
Oh, if I had only known it was that easy, damn.
You wouldn't have had to hire him to be your co-host.
Yeah. Right. So Taylor, I'm curious about the difference. So we've just 17 months still going through this pandemic, and we're certainly in the United States. You're experiencing a massive 4th wave, so it doesn't look like it's going away anytime real soon, unfortunately. We're experiencing a much smaller wave. Our vaccine rates in Canada are quite a bit higher, but still, seeing an upward trend. And so, your stock in trade was traveling a lot and speaking at events and doing sessions, a lot of live teaching on how to do poetry. And now you're doing or had done in the past, things like these little Facebook live events where you were reading for 30, 40 people, right? So I'm curious, what's the difference between connecting, with audience members live, that connection that you make? Because I think that's probably a big part of doing these live poetry readings, and connecting with people online, performing for crowds of hundreds at a conference or an event or in a bar or in a venue, to talking to 30 people on camera on Facebook. We know it's possible to make connections online. I mean, a lot of my, good friends, I'm deeply connected with and spend virtually all my time with them online. How different does that feel to you? And what has been your experience the last 17 months trying to foster those connections?
Well, I'm a spoken word poet, right? So I'm not just a poet. I'm not just somebody who makes his living just writing about the moon. I also take these poems and I present them. Like I went to drama school. I studied with the RSC in Oxford for a summer, and I'm a sort of a frustrated actor. We had Jeremy Irons come to speak to us and say, for God's sakes, if there's anything else that you can do besides becoming an actor, do it. And I thought, I've always wanted to be a poet. So if he says being an actor is too hard, I've got poetry to fall back on. That's not quite how it worked. I was a teacher for many years in between. But I feel like my bread and butter is that I make poetry come alive before a live audience, and then that's a little bit awkward when you don't have live audiences. So there's a different skill set to master. Now you're going to be releasing this as a podcast, but you use the platform. We're recording this on a platform called Squadcast, so the three of us can see each other on the screen, and I know that Mike, when this is going to be weird for your listeners, but Mike, this is me looking at you, and Brad, this is me looking at you. But if I knew that you were performing this, using the video, then I spend the entire time looking there, right? You notice the difference of me looking at the tiny little camera and not at you. Like, do you know the difference when you get a selfie from somebody, when you can tell that they are, they've sort of progressed beyond selfie 101. Most selfies, you can sense in the person's eyes that they're looking at themselves in the monitor. They're not looking at the lens of the camera. Selfie, like advanced selfie technology, is when you count 1, 2, 3, and then you look away. Like, I didn't take this selfie. This is me looking cute off to the side, when in fact 2 seconds before that you had been looking right, probably not even at the lens. Right.
Top tier selfie game.
Right. So I mean, to sort of answer the question you didn't quite ask, we've all been learning how to do Zoom and other platforms, and there are a couple of things that I like about online readings. For instance, I've read to a lot of schools that I wouldn't have been able to, they wouldn't have been able to afford me, or I wouldn't have gotten there. So there were a couple of schools in upstate New York where, in the beginning days of the quarantine, my wife and my 2 kids and I escaped from Brooklyn, where I live and where I'm talking to you now, up to Connecticut, up in Litchfield County, where my parents built a house inside of a 200-year-old barn in 1969. And we'd just been going there for summers and weekends, and there was nobody there. It was mid-March, and there was nobody there, and so we escaped from Brooklyn, just as, like, right before the New York Times published an article about how New Yorkers are spreading the virus by leaving New York. And, we were part of that wave of people who were just fleeing the city before anybody knew really what was going on. We spent 71 days straight in this big old barn in Litchfield County, where I haven't spent that much time straight since I was 15. Because when I was 16, I got my driver's license, and I didn't have to stay there. I could go visit friends in Massachusetts, and so. But I did a gig. I taught a workshop at this small school in upstate New York, and I never would have gotten there. And so I've done a lot of readings for places that I would never get to, and that's wonderful. But to answer the main thrust of your question, it's horrible. I miss the connection. I miss the connection that I get when I'm performing in front of an audience, and that there are certain lines in certain of my poems. One of my my most anthemic poem about teaching is What Teachers Make. But there's another one of my poems about teaching that is sort of an anthem, and it's called Miracle Workers. Sunday nights I lie in bed awake as all teachers do. and wait for sleep to come, as though sleep were the last student in my class to arrive. That's how the poem begins. Except when I was on a tour of the United Arab Emirates, because apparently in the UAE and many Arabic-speaking countries, they don't. I might be getting this wrong, but they don't want to have the same weekend as Jews and Christians. So
Yeah. They go to school on Sunday.
On Sunday, that's right. Did you teach in the UAE?
No, but I have a good friend who does. He's a school director in Dubai, and I was completely thrown off that we were talking on a Sunday, and he was talking to me in a Zoom call from his office at school because he was at work that day. And I was like, "What the hell are you doing there on a Sunday?"
Yeah.
And he's like, "I'm working."
You reminded me that I've taught at about 50 American schools, international schools all around the world, and the one thing that I know about the faculty of the American schools and international schools is that they are more likely to be Canadian. It seems to be a really popular job. With the Canadians.
It is. Yeah, I know a number of Canadians who are head of schools.
Your friend who's the head of the school in Dubai is gonna go to Hong Kong next, and in 5 years he's gonna be in Nairobi. They stay 3 years at one school and then they go to the next. So I was in the UAE or Qatar or something like that. I when I did that poem Metaphor, Miracle Workers, I had to say, Saturday nights, I lie in bed awake, as all teachers do.
That's awesome.
And so there's a line in that poem where I talk about a student in my class digging around in his backpack for a pen, and how teachers are people who give you what you need before you even realize that you need it. That's sort of one of the lines. I'm a teacher. That's what we do. Thank you for the compliment. Teachers, are people. I gave you what you need. All I did was give you what you needed before you knew you needed it. So I see that, and this is based on a math class I was teaching. My degree is in English, but I taught math at the last school where I taught, and it was actually based on a. He was looking for a calculator. The kids were allowed to bring their own calculators, but if they forgot, I had a stash of about half a dozen calculators that I could loan out. And I would say, here, you need a calculator? Fine, give me your shoe. And so they give me their shoe, and I give them a calculator to make sure they don't walk off with the calculator, right? So this kid, Nicholas Latcher, is digging around, and I know in 30 seconds he's going to say, "Mr. Molly, can I borrow one of your calculators?" So I just pull one out of my desk, and I go and I put it on his desk, on his desk. And he, sure enough, he raises his hand and says, "Mr. Molly, can I borrow your calculator?" And the whole class saw me do it. And they're all looking at me, and I'm looking at him like, did you really not see that there's a calculator right in front of you that I put there? And I was able to say, "You already possess everything you require to succeed." And he looked at it and thought, "Oh my God, you're a miracle worker," which is how I bring the title of the poem in. But there's a line in that poem where I changed it to a pen, because when you're writing a poem, you're under no obligation to repeat the facts like a journalist, right? I'm allowed to poetic license. I'm allowed to change the facts of a circumstance if it's going to make a better poem. And so I give her the pen, and she doesn't see it. And there's a line where, when I'm performing the poem live, I can get a laugh out of looking up at the ceiling, pretending to be the girl going, "Oh my God, how did you deliver this pen to me?" And she looks up at the ceiling, and the audience laughs. And that, I haven't had that connection with an audience, in 18 months. There are a couple of other benefits to Zoom things that we could talk about, but that's a long answer to your question. It's terrible. It's terrible.
I could let you give us long answers to questions for the next day and a half.
That's
and be totally
very sweet.
Content with my life.
That's very sweet.
I do have a question kind of along the lines, like sort of a lot of the veins of what you just hit on. Like you said, you do spoken word poetry, you do performance, and to kind of tease the audience, you might even have a poem for us that's currently unreleased. You might be able to share in a little bit, but that kind of plays into my question of, when you're writing poetry, is the performance in the writing process, or does the performance come after the fact?
Excellent question. And I last week I interviewed one of my new favorite poets, Maggie Smith, whose fourth book of poetry called Goldenrod just came out. She's got like 14 online interviews, in the next 15 days. She gets 1 day off. And we got to the rocket round, and I asked her questions like, is recreational marijuana legal in Ohio? Do you mow your own lawn? Whose birthday whose 87th birthday is going to be December 28th of this year? And she was like, the other Maggie Smith? I'm like, that's correct. But one of the questions I like to ask is almost the one you asked. But for me, I say performance is part of the editing process. It's not, I try to banish the part of my brain that is a performer when I'm writing. And I'm just, I'm trying to surprise myself a little bit when I'm writing. And I'm looking at line breaks. I'm an old slam poet, and slam poets often, first, in the early 90s, slam poets came out because we wanted to have things to sell at the poetry slam to pay for our beer. And so a lot of us put out CDs. And, hey, I'm a slam poet. Here's my DVD, because I'm super technological. And I think I almost, I never actually came out. Here's my mini disc. Mini disc? This is the height of technology. This will never get replaced.
That's fancy.
But how did I start talking about CDs?
Slam poets and performance as part of editing.
Yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. But I do know I run a series in New York. At least I used to run a series in New York called Page Meets Stage, where the Pulitzer Prize meets the Poetry Slam. We're at the Bowery Poetry Club. We've been at a couple other venues, but you can search on YouTube Page Meets Stage, and you'll get about 100 videos from the last 15 years of me putting up on stage two poets. One who writes from a more page-bound perspective, more traditional poet. Nobody likes to be called an academic poet, but a lot of them teach in the academy, so what am I going to call you? And then slam poets, more spoken word poets like me. And we got three types of pairings. There's the mentor pairing. The very first pairing of Page Meets Stage was November 12th, 2005, and it was me with my mentor, Billy Collins. And some of those videos are on YouTube. And so I am very much in the school of Billy Collins. He is a mentor to me. And then you've got what we call Birds of a Feather, which is where, the poets are about the same age, about the same level of success. One is not the mentor of the other. They both write from the same perspective. Maybe they know of each other, but they're definitely going to be good friends after the evening is over. And then the third type of pairing we have is called Apples and Oranges, or What Would Happen If, where we take just completely different, like this person is an uptight academic poet and this person is a, drunk, wayward performance poet. What do you think would happen if we put them in the same room, on the same stage for 90 minutes? And those have been some of our best and all of our worst pairings. But one of the questions that I like, because we always do a Q&A, one of the questions I like to ask them is, if you finish a poem and then you read it to an audience and you find that it doesn't get the reaction that you thought, do you change the poem? Or is that just their loss? And that's a very, what's the litmus test? It's like a litmus test to see who has the soul of a performance poet, because a performance poet will view the act of performance as part of the editing process. And I think nine times out of 10, a spoken word or performance poet, if they didn't get the reaction that they wanted, a couple of times in a row would realize, okay, I'm either not performing that line right, or else the line's not right. I can change the line. When I was interviewing Maggie Smith, that was one of my questions. Is for you the active performance part of the editing process, or does an audience only hear a poem after it's finished? And she said the latter, whereas I embody the former.
Super interesting. One of my favorite videos on the entire internet, and I watch it all the time, even though I know exactly how it ends, is and it's amazing. Just it's mind-blowing even thinking of it. The day Maggie Rogers, the singer Maggie Rogers, got discovered, was in a class. She was in her music creation class, and they had Pharrell come as a guest to kind of listen to their music, their pieces. Each student got to got to play Pharrell a piece of music. And Pharrell would give them notes, like just ideas, thoughts on what he had just listened to. And so Maggie Rogers is sitting beside Pharrell, and their teacher's on the other side. And his face just changes from the start to the end. And he's almost crying by the end. And this is Pharrell, and he's like a pretty cool dude. But his head is exploding in real time while he's listening to Maggie Rogers' music. And what I thought of was that, he knew right away. Like, he knew that she was a star. And this was like, she was like, I'm going to play you this. I'm still working on it. I'm not sure it's completely done. And he listened to it, and she was signed within 6 months. I saw her open for Mumford & Sons just before the pandemic hit. Like, she's a star now. But she was discovered, by Pharrell in this, music class in New York City. And so I was curious. It brought me to this question, this idea. Is there certain traits or a set of traits or something? Is there a thing that makes people more adept at writing poetry, and how would you know if someone had those qualities? Like, when you see, because you see lots of students who are learning, and have you ever read someone and went, holy shit, you've got it, like, this is it? And what do you think that those is there something, like, what is that thing? And I guess the second part of this question is, do you think that there are qualities, like, for performing poetry that are in the same idea, like, where you hear someone delivering their poetry and you go, whoa, you're the next? I'm curious, your thoughts on both the writing and the delivery.
Okay. First of all, there's a small part of me that was dismayed when I realized that your question, which began one of my favorite videos online, I thought you were.
And it wasn't going to be about you.
I really thought it was going to be one of mine. I just have to acknowledge. I have to acknowledge that part of me that whose heart is broken because I thought it was like, oh, is it How Falling in Love is Like Owning a Dog? Is it On Girls Lending Pens? Let me guess. It's Undivided Attention. Is it that one? Okay, but then when I realized, all right, it's not about me. Which is something I tell myself.
Go watch that video, Taylor. Trust me.
Maggie Rogers and Pharrell.
And Pharrell.
I will, because I love videos like that. I love any video that says 5 times a fan blew the mind of the lead singer. They say that Kate Bush got discovered because Peter Gabriel was at the front of his concert, and like extending the microphone out to like, who wants to sing along of Salisbury Hill? And she grabbed the mic, and he's like, wait a second, you come up here. There's a video of Michael Bublé. There's a video of Michael Bublé. This mom says, "Would you please sing with my son? He's 15 years old. Today's his birthday." And he's like, "Okay, fine. Bring him down here." And it turns out the kid can sing. And he's like,
Yeah.
and Michael Bublé has a potty mouth. And he's like, "Holy shit balls. Let's oh my God." And it's really good. I love videos like that of watching somebody get discovered.
Yeah.
If you go back and listen closely, you'll actually hear Taylor click his pen and start to write down the title of the video before we get to the question. I could see him do it on the video. Like if you go back and listen, you'll hear it.
You'll hear this.
Yep. And he wrote down the video information so he could look it up later.
No, I did. And I was making notes as Mike was asking his question. So I love videos like that. And then you said, what is that thing? Have I ever taught a student and thought, oh my goodness. I'll tell you what I do see, because I'm there to teach, and I'm teaching them to write better poems. And then if the class goes well, by the end of the class, we can talk a little bit about how to present the poems better. Let me answer the last question first. I never see anybody perform their poems and say, "You are it." Because it is so unnatural to arrive at the necessary voice for presenting poetry. I like to say the first 6 lessons of public speaking, especially poetry, are louder, slower, and clearer. And then that's the first 3. Those are also the 4th, 5th, and 6th, because it's just so hard. I'll tell you a quick story. I once had a student who I had said, "Okay, loud, slow, clear. It's Bobby's turn to read." And he gets up and he goes, "On the wall of my room, there is a map of Vietnam." I said, "Bobby, remember what we said, loud, slow, clear." "Oh, sorry, Mr. Molly." "On the wall of my room, there is a map of Vietnam." I said, "Bobby, that was exactly the same." He said, "Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Molly. I didn't know you actually wanted me to do what you said." "Okay, you want loud, slow, clear? You got it. Ready? Watch out. Cover your ears. Here we go. On the wall of my room, there is a map of Vietnam." And I was like, "Bobby, come on. What are we doing? What are we doing here? If you are not going to do what you say you're going to do, what I want you to teach." So finally, Bobby goes, "On the wall of my room, there is a map of," oh my God. And he sits down. And I said, "Why did you stop?" And he said, and these are literally his words, "Wasn't I screaming? Didn't I sound stupid?" And I said to the class, "Raise your hand if you think Bobby was screaming and sounded stupid." And no one, except for Bobby's best friend, raised their hand. Because the truth is, when you are speaking poetry in the appropriate voice, and I don't mean the sing-song equality that people get into in the late 90s when they are reading their poetry, but when you are simply wanting the words that you have spent so much time perfecting to take center stage, the way that you, as the author, take a step back is to be loud, slow, and clear. So loud that you think you are screaming. So slow that you think people are going to say, "Get on with it, get on with it." And so clear that you think people are going to be annoyed with your best pronunciation. But they never are. So part of what I'm teaching, note that just does not come to anybody naturally. So I've never listened to anybody perform and say, "Oh my God, you are the next thing." Maybe that's coming. But I'll tell you what I have often witnessed, and this is great, is when a student is afraid to have their classmates read a line because they feel like they've revealed a little too much of themselves. I teach a workshop based on a poem by former U.S. Poet Laureate Ted Kooser, Kooser, and it's called Abandoned Farmhouse. And he walks around the persona walks around an abandoned farmhouse and lets the objects around him speak to sort of give you clues of who lived there. And so I have the students write a poem like this themselves, like, go to your room and pick 10 things. What do these things say about you? So they come into class one day, and I collect the poems and I give them to my assistant. I had an assistant, and the assistant was supposed to go outside in the hallway and pick 3 that we were going to workshop in class, and the rest, they all know that if you don't get your poem chosen to get a workshop in class, I will give it a good response at night, so that you win either way. So as soon as I send all the poems out with AJ, my assistant, this kid Topher comes up and says, "Mr. Marley, I think my poem, I don't think it's ready." I was like, "What are you trying to say?" He said, "I don't want my poem to be chosen to be workshopped." And I said, "That's out of my, it sucks to be you. I gave the poems to AJ. He's going to be the one to choose." All right. So I take them through a writing workshop. At the end of a little writing exercise to begin the morning. AJ comes in and says, "Topher, we're definitely doing yours." Topher hangs his head with what he is sure. He's a 10th grade boy, and he's sure that this is the end of his life. And the line that he didn't want his classmates to hear was this, as far as I remember it. The half-drunk bottle of whiskey in the lowest drawer of his desk says that he is not the good boy his parents think he is. And there was a palpable, can a gasp be palpable? There was a appreciable gasp from the audience, from the rest of the class, as they realized, oh my goodness, that was everybody's favorite line. And this one girl said, "I didn't know we could write about things that were important." I was like, oh my God, have I not been doing my job right? Absolutely, you should be writing about things that are important. So I want to say, you said, what do I tell people? I tell people to write a poem. Write me lines that begin with the line, "You should probably know." Like, for me, the confessional kind of poetry that I write, you can always hear the poet saying, "You should probably know this. I should probably tell you that the half-drunk bottle of whiskey in the bottom of my closet drawer, of my desk drawer, says he is not the good boy his parents think." You should be writing stuff that is important, and it's about revealing. I have this theory of poetics that I've never quite, I should write an essay about this, but I call it the reveiling theory. And that writing a poem involves 4 steps. The first is to reveal. You need to reveal something about yourself. And then you need to revile in it. Like, be disgusted. Be disgusted by what you just revealed. And then flip the script and revel in it and change it and go, "No, you know what? You know what? That's what I thought. That's who I am. I'm going to revel in it instead of revile in it." And then lastly, you put a new veil over it. You sort of reveil it. So a lot of the poems that I write are excavating an embarrassing truth and then putting a new veil on it. Hope that answers your question.
We are building this virtual community of educators who share an interest in game design and teaching new skills. We will use this space to connect, collaborate, and innovate with the Sandbox.
That's Sebastian Bourget. He's the co-founder and chief operating officer at the Sandbox.
This community is here to provide guidance, support, feedback, and suggestions on how to best use the Sandbox within the context of teaching and learning how to make video games. It allows also to connect experts and educators, bringing together existing creators and members of the Sandbox game platform community with professional educators.
The Sandbox community has grown into a vibrant space of 100+ educators. How can you get involved? More to come later in the episode.
So you've created a product that I'm super fascinated, and Brad, as you know, Brad has this, which is, all equally shocking and not at the same time. Like, I mean, it was like, I'm completely unsurprised. You've created this thing called metaphor dice. So talk about what metaphor dice are, because they seem really friggin' cool, and I'm about to go buy some.
Oh, good. Good.
So tell the folks what metaphor dice are, why you created it, and what they're all about.
Metaphor dice are 12 dice, 4 of each of 3 different colors, red, white, and blue. You roll them and you arrange them red, white, and blue. And the reds are all big nouns, big things, concepts that might need ideas, things that might need a metaphor. And the whites are the adjectives and the blues are the smaller nouns. And if you put them all together, you get an instant metaphor. Like here, I've got a couple set up for an event that I'm having on Thursday, August 5th. The truth is a broken trophy. Your mother is a desperate wonder. What is hope? Hope is a mad drum. Who has not lain awake at night and listened to the beat of the mad drum of hope? So students who say, I don't know what to write about, that's a legitimate problem. I don't know what to write about. So metaphor dice don't write the first line for you, but they give you a good idea for a first line. And it started because I was teaching a workshop, 2016, I was teaching a workshop where I basically have students create a list of abstract nouns and concrete nouns and adjectives. And then I have to explain the difference between an abstract noun. This is a thing you can't touch. It's an idea. It's a concept. Loyalty, love, happiness. These are all abstract nouns. And a concrete noun is something humbler. It's smaller. It's a pencil, a broken pencil. And then the adjectives, they all get that. And you pick one from each column, and there's a metaphor that maybe you want to explore. And I came upon this girl, and I said, "Why aren't you getting involved in the workshop?" And I'm just the poet from Brooklyn. I'm the ponytailed. I used to have a ponytail. The ponytailed poet from Brooklyn come in to wherever I'm been invited to be the guest speaker, and some students think if I can just like tough my way through this hour, then I'll go back to my regular class and I don't have to do this. So this girl was like, I don't want to do this. And I said, what's wrong? She said, I'm really more of a math science person. And I taught math. And I said, well, that's okay. And I don't know where I came up with this, but I said, a metaphor is really just an equation between a big thing and a small thing. It's a way of saying this equals that, at least for the length of this poem. For instance, pick 3 words from the board. And she said, my father, broken mirror. I was like, okay, is your father still alive? She's like, I don't know, maybe. And I was like, okay, so does it feel better to say my father was a broken mirror? She's like, yeah. I said, okay, my father was a broken mirror. Nobody would think you meant that literally, right? You mean that's a figurative expression. That's a metaphor. He wasn't really a broken mirror, but he was like a broken mirror. And so your job is to explain how that was true. And she said, I think I can do that. So I said, all right, I'll come back in 5 minutes. Use the expression, which is to say. And so I came back, and this is as close as to what she wrote as I can remember. I'm plagiarizing now. My father is a broken mirror, which is to say he's been shattered into 1,000 pieces. He's hard to hold without cutting yourself. My mother says he is 7 years of bad luck. But even in the smallest pieces, I can still recognize my own reflection. Now, you asked when have I ever said, oh my goodness, you've got it? Like that was one of those moments where I said, that is amazing. She said, what do I need to do to turn that into a poem? I said, nothing. That is a poem already. And I left that class thinking, I got to, if only there were a way to get more students to that point.
Yeah.
Without having to spend 25 minutes explaining the difference between a concrete noun and an abstract noun. And that's how I came up with metaphor dice. So it's 12 dice, and 24 reds, 24 different reds, whites, and blues. So the total number of unique metaphors is 24 to the third power, which is like 13,824 in one box. And it just sort of blows writer's block out of the water. And some are good, some are not. And but you have a metaphor that might spark you to write something that you wouldn't have otherwise.
Cool. Teachers need to take note. That those would be a cool classroom.
Well,
I've used them in classrooms. I've used them in
How do they go? How do they go?
Awesome. I've used them in classes. I've also used them in writing sessions when I was doing NaNoWriMo stuff. So with other adult writers, I've used them all the time. I would take the sets and I'd just give like little small groups, 3 of one of each type of dice.
Yeah, that's all you need.
But I also I think there's something, and I think elementary teachers will understand this, but there's something about the physical. First of all, metaphor is the opposite of physical to me. Yeah. But then physically having the dice and then rolling them, and I have to tell this because it's, of all the things my podcast created before I got to OnEd, probably the quintessential moment is the 15 minutes that I spent writing poetry with Taylor Molly. And you might have heard it on the audio as I was going through my book. I actually still have sitting next to my desk the poem that I wrote while we were talking. The metaphor we came up with is "Your mother is a sinful wedding gown," which I still think is just like an awesome metaphor, and may not even be one that's on the dice at this point. But it's such a cool. And you and I both wrote poetry about it, and there's something powerful about even starting from the same prompt. And then coming up with such vastly different responses.
That's what we're doing on Thursday. Also,
hashtag not an ad. But I have to put that out there. I just genuinely think these are really cool.
Do you have dice that have sinful?
Yeah.
Okay, then you're right. You do have a set.
You sent me a set when I asked you to be on the show, and then I bought a set. So I have the actual purchasable set, and then I.
When did I send you a set? When did I send you a set?
I don't have dates on this note, so I'm not.
But I mean, was it before 2018?
Yeah, it was probably before they officially released, or right around the time they officially released.
Okay, yeah. So you got one of the earliest prototype sets.
You are
sinful.
OG.
I was told not to put sinful dice on the dice. Things that were just overly that sort of skirted, skewed religious. So I had to get rid of sinful. I had to get rid of. My soul is, which I didn't mind. I don't like soul. When a kid mentions soul, anybody who mentions their soul in a poem has lost me almost already. So no, you're right. I thought you were talking in the first edition of the dice. I didn't want to put death, so my friend said, "Well, why don't you make one of the red dice be death is not?" And so, but then in the next draft, I was like, no, you know what? I'm a poet. I have to write about death. So it went back to death. And then do you have the little purple set of the bigger vocab words?
No, I don't have that one.
Okay.
Now I feel like I need something for my collection.
Yeah, you do. I will make sure that you guys get that. And I should say, metaphordice.com is the website. And, anybody who goes there can buy, obviously, a set for themselves. Hashtag this is not an advertisement. But they can, as they are checking out, they can buy a set for a random teacher that they will, who will never get to thank them. My business partner, he's the one with the MBA, said, you know what? People want to be generous, and our job is to help them be generous. So let's offer them a less than half price option as they're checking out to, give a set to a random teacher and we'll keep track of a list. And I said, but how are they gonna trust us that we do it? He's like, they're not. They're gonna just do it. And we've given over 1,000 sets of metaphor dice.
That makes me happy. I love that.
Yeah.
That's so cool. So Taylor, you suggested at the outset of this that you have done some new work, and before we went live, you had said that you were willing to share some of that, which is, incredibly exciting. So if you have, you said you had a couple poems, or at least one, or whatever. I'd love that. I'd love to hear what you've been working on.
All right. I'm working on a poem called a manuscript called "Not Beyond Repair," and that's the working title. And this first poem is from that collection, and it's called "Making Sense of the World." My son tried 3 times to ask me for something, but never got further than, "Daddy, can I?" So I asked him if Kanayam was a new kid in his class, because there already is both a Kanaya and a Nyan, and it seemed like a pretty good guess and an awesome dad joke all rolled into one. And that was the day that Kanayam Buttsworth was born. And yes, his last name is Buttsworth. And it turns out that he is not in my son's class, but is rather the central actor in the common history he is creating for himself. Not so much an imaginary friend as someone he can mention casually in conversation as having done things that my son has only ever heard about. For instance, you might not know this, but Kanayam Buttsworth goes to work every day at AM, PM o'clock. Why? Because someone has to pay for the money. Kanayam Buttsworth is a fireman, a policeman, an astronaut, and a great white shark. Kanayam Buttsworth likes blackberries, pirate booty, and bubble baths with his little sister. Incidentally, Kanayam Buttsworth has both a penis and a gina. It's true, because Kanayam Buttsworth is 5 years old, but also 6, 100, and the same age as Daddy, which is like 40, 20, 60 years old. Kanayam Buttsworth once jumped off the top of the Empire State Building and died like Abraham Lincoln of ballistic trauma. He also died of pleurisy like Benjamin Franklin a long, long time ago, like 40, 20, 60 years ago. But now he is alive and well and living in Seattle with Grandma and Grandpa. If dreams are where the mind churns and jumbles through the flotsam of the recent past, then the person who does that for my son while he is awake is none other than Buttsworth, Kanayam Buttsworth. And if I sometimes embellish his exploits, it's only because I love saying his name. And poetry is what does that for me, how I make sense of the world when I am in need of healing that I cannot find elsewhere. Which reminds me that Kanayam Buttsworth is a widower who didn't know if he would ever find love again or have children, whose heart was shattered into 40, 20, 60 pieces. But somehow he has survived. And he wears a mask made out of his own underpants, and he peers through the leg holes with X-ray eyes, because, as you have no doubt figured out by now, Kanayam Buttsworth is a superhero. Hello, did I mention he has a penis and a gina? Kanayam Buttsworth can fly underwater, and he writes poems, too, and he can fix anything, just like you, Daddy, just like you. That's one. All right. I'm going to stop and take a drink.
There's something like inherently you about that. There's something about your right. And I don't know. I mean, everybody has their style, but there's something about that just screams you. No, like, I don't know. I don't know what else. That's not an intelligent thing to say. It's some kind of a compliment, but that's what I got.
Do you have little kids?
My son is 9. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, so you went through that before I
went through it.
Yeah.
Yep. Oh, I have a 5-year-old who is.
He's going through the Kanayam Buttsworth.
Yeah, he's right there.
You got to have somebody.
Yeah, I was feeling a lot of that.
Oh, good. Well, there's a poem that I just finished today that I haven't actually put down in words. It's about 6 lines, and it's called Love Balloons, and it goes, may my children never learn, or if they do, let it not be soon, that every morning you and I make love, I come home in the afternoon with my hands full of balloons. I just noticed that I every time my wife and I have sex, I buy balloons for the kids. And it's like, you know what? There's a poem right here. And they're like, Daddy, balloons. Why did you get us balloons? Oh my God, you got us balloons last week too. I'm like, I know.
We're gonna make sure that your kids find a way to play this back in 10 years.
Oh, I know. They're gonna. Well, you know what? If I publish a poem about it, they're gonna go, wait a minute. Is that why we had so many balloons back in the early 2020s? It's like, yeah, there was a pandemic.
Crack the code. Oh, that's amazing.
Okay.
So good.
Here's a poem. I finished this draft yesterday. I think it's going to be called "Breathless in the Chase," and it's about my ex-wife. And the first line came to me, and there are a whole lot of W's in the first line, and I loved the sound of it, the music of it. And then I quickly realized, you got to stop that. You got to that's enough. It's enough to play with, and now do something else. So this is the first time I've ever read this out loud for anybody live, and this is called "Breathless in the Chase." Once I watched whales with a wife and wondered whether she would leave. Not because we never made love when the dives were done. After all, the sun was hot and the days were long, and the waves, like the song of the whales, rocked us to sleep each night in the bed on board the boat we shared, which was barely big enough for one. Can you hear me doing at the end of that stanza with B's what I started out doing with W's? Once I watched whales with a wife and wondered whether she would leave. Not because we never made love when the dives were done. After all, the sun was hot and the days were long, and the waves, like the song of the whales, rocked us to sleep each night in the bed on board the boat we shared, which was barely big enough for one. No, I wondered at her leaving in the movement of the whales, the bull, the calf, and the cow, and how at first they'd let themselves be seen, but then, with hardly any movement from flipper, fluke, or fin, they would begin to dive or swim or disappear in any case and leave us breathless in the chase. I was the one who whined and wailed about how they always got away, while she, my wife, would only smile and close her eyes as if to say, there's nothing that I would not give to live that life, to move that way. So in that poem, you can see I'm, revealing the whale watching trip. I could see in the whale watching trip that this was not going to last. She was going to go. She was going to go. And but I'm the one at the end of the poem. I'm the one that's whining. I'm giving her this. I read this to my current wife. She's like, "Wow, you really let her off easy, didn't you?" It's like, "Yeah, but you know what? Nobody wins when you write a poem attacking your ex-wife." Anyway, those are two poems. One last year and one just this week.
Fantastic.
That's awesome. Oh, so cool. Taylor, so much thank you. It's so awesome to have had you and just get to talk to you. And I'm so excited for people to hear this and just like be in the awe I find myself in at the moment. So
and you're going to run this. You're going to run this likely before August 5th.
Yeah, I think we're gonna. Let's see. What's today? The 2nd. We'll probably, hopefully.
Then let me
Give or take a day.
Let me put in one pitch for Metaphor Die, which is an online event that I'm hosting at 8:30 Eastern. Metaphor Die, which is to say, has 2 poets, 2 rappers, and 2 stand-up comedians all responding to the dice. And we'll roll the dice, they choose a metaphor, and then before they come back and offer what they've been writing, we're all going to turn to the chat screen and say, all right, if you've got a line that you wrote, drop it now. And we're going to spend 30 seconds like reading what people put in the chat. And I'm hoping that the invited artists, whoever competing that round, are going to go, oh shit, who wrote that line? And then we're going to go. And here's something you can do. I hinted at this earlier. Here's something that Zoom offers to a online reading that you can't do live. And that is, we can say at the top of the show, if you're the type of person who likes to participate, figure out how to raise your hand digitally and put it in the upper corner. And you can leave your hand raised for the entire 90 minutes. And if you come up with a line that the artists love and they want to meet you, we're going to go and check to make sure that your camera is on. And if your hand is raised, we're going to invite you on screen, and you will compete against them, and you will be the chosen one. So anybody who's interested in going that can register quickly for as little as $1. just go search. Can I give you a link that you can post here?
Yeah, it'll be in the show notes for sure.
All right, then the event Ticketbrite link will be there, and come drop a couple of lines in the chat and blow us away.
Love it. I love it. Well, Taylor, again, thank you. Before I appreciate that, I hope people go check that out. But also, how can they get a hold of you if they want to see more of your work and check out your stuff?
There's more than you could ever possibly want on YouTube. One of my favorite compliments ever to get is from parents of teenagers who say, "I have not spoken a full sentence. My daughter has not spoken a full sentence to me in 18 months, but she just came to me and said, 'You've got to see this poem.' And we watched your video, and we spent 2 hours watching your videos on YouTube. So thank you for that. So search Taylor Mali, Mali spelled like the African country, M-A-L-I. Well, people are gonna see that printed. And taylormali.com is my website, and you can follow me on Twitter, things like that. It's all the usual ways.
Taylor Mali, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Awesome.
Bye-bye.
The Sandbox is creating a learning ecosystem where educators can learn in weekly streams, bring ideas into their classrooms, collaborate with other educators, and become Sandbox ambassadors.
Our goal through the stream is to show the world how low the barrier can be to teaching and learning game making through our no-code and accessible platform. Anyone can do it. Passion and education. You can feel it in the streams as we explore and share ideas around game design implementation in your teaching practice.
Join the community to learn more at go.participate.com/sandbox.
Thanks for listening to OnEducation. My name is Brad Schruffler. My co-hosts are Mike Washburn and Glenn Urban. OnEducation is part of the On Podcast Media Network. You can listen to this show and many others by great educators like Monica Burns, Mike Matera, Tisha Richmond, and many more by visiting onpodcastmedia.com. Want to get in touch with us? Check out our website at oneducationpodcast.com. You can tweet us at oneducationpod. Mike is Mr. Washburn on Twitter. Glenn can be found on Twitter at Spanish, and I can be found at Brad Streffler. You can find us on Facebook by visiting facebook.com/oneducationpod. We're also on Instagram at oneducationpod. If you're enjoying the show and think others would too, we would be thrilled if you would share it with them. Please leave us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts. When you leave a rating, it gives our rankings a boost. This helps others discover the show. We want to thank our presenting sponsor, Participate, for supporting us. Check out participate.com to learn more about them. Thanks as always for listening, stay awesome, and see you soon.